If you've ever found yourself tangled up with a narcissist, you already know exactly how exhausting and disorienting it can be. These are people who've usually gotten remarkably skilled at controlling situations and bending other people to their will. But here's the good news. You don't need to stay stuck in that dynamic, and you definitely don't need to accept it as your fate. Their ability to control the emotional environment around them does not mean they have permanent control over you. It may feel that way when you've spent enough time adapting yourself to someone else's moods, expectations, reactions, and demands. You may have learned to choose your words carefully, anticipate their responses, apologize before you even understand what you supposedly did wrong, or remain silent simply because speaking up seems to create another explosion. Over time, this can make control feel normal. And that's one of the most dangerous parts of a manipulative dynamic. It doesn't always look like control from the inside. Sometimes it looks like keeping the peace. Sometimes it looks like being understanding. Sometimes it looks like giving someone another chance because you remember the good moments. Sometimes it even looks like love. You start believing that if you can just communicate better, remain calmer, become more patient, or understand them deeply enough, everything will finally become stable. You begin treating their behavior as a puzzle you need to solve rather than a pattern you need to recognize. But you were never supposed to become an expert at managing another person's emotions just to earn basic respect. A healthy relationship doesn't require you to constantly calculate the emotional weather. You shouldn't have to wake up wondering which version of someone you're going to encounter. You shouldn't have to monitor their tone, facial expressions, messages, silences, or sudden changes in affection to determine whether you're safe enough to speak honestly. When manipulation becomes a recurring pattern, your nervous system can become trained around it. You become hyper-aware. You notice tiny changes that other people might overlook because you've learned that small changes can precede much bigger reactions. A delayed response can make you anxious. A cold tone can make you question yourself. A sudden burst of affection can make you hopeful again. And this creates a cycle. Tension builds. You become anxious. They withdraw, criticize, punish, or create confusion. You try harder to repair things. They regain a sense of control. Then comes relief. And that relief can feel like love. This is why leaving a controlling relationship can be psychologically difficult even when you know, intellectually, that the relationship is unhealthy. You're not simply walking away from a person. You're breaking away from an entire emotional system you've adapted yourself to survive. But systems can be broken. The first step is recognizing that you don't have to participate in every dynamic you're invited into. Someone can accuse you without requiring you to defend yourself for hours. Someone can become angry without making their anger your responsibility. Someone can distort a situation without forcing you to convince them of reality. Someone can threaten to leave without requiring you to beg them to stay. Someone can give you the silent treatment without making you chase them for reassurance. This is where your power begins to return, not through revenge, not through manipulation of your own, not through trying to become colder than the person who hurt you. Your power returns through emotional independence. You begin realizing that their reaction does not automatically define your behavior. Their disappointment does not automatically mean you've done something wrong. Their anger is not automatically evidence that you've been unfair. Their version of events is not automatically more accurate simply because they express it with confidence. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to think. You are allowed to say, I don't agree with that. You are allowed to leave a conversation that has become abusive. You are allowed to stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. And perhaps most importantly, you are allowed to change your mind. If you once tolerated something because you didn't know how harmful it was, you don't have to keep tolerating it simply because you tolerated it before. Your previous boundaries do not become permanent contracts. You can learn, you can wake up, you can recognize patterns. You can decide that something that once seemed acceptable no longer belongs in your life. This is why clarity is so powerful. Manipulation thrives on confusion. When you are constantly questioning yourself, the other person's interpretation can become the loudest voice in the room. But when you begin documenting patterns, trusting your observations, and stepping back emotionally, things often become easier to see. You stop asking, how do I make them understand? And start asking, what does their behavior tell me? That shift is enormous. because the first question keeps your attention focused on changing them. The second brings your attention back to yourself. You cannot control whether another person becomes self-aware. You cannot force someone to develop empathy. You cannot make someone respect boundaries through the perfect explanation. You cannot reason someone into treating you well if they benefit from treating you poorly. But you can decide what you will participate in. That distinction can change everything. Suppose someone repeatedly crosses a boundary and then apologizes. If nothing changes afterward, the apology becomes part of the cycle rather than evidence of transformation. You don't have to spend endless energy analyzing whether the apology was sincere. You can simply observe what happens next. Behavior provides information. Consistency provides information. Accountability provides information. Change provides information. And when you begin looking at behavior rather than promises, manipulation becomes much harder to maintain. You may also discover something uncomfortable. Sometimes the person controlling you isn't the only one maintaining the dynamic. You may have been maintaining it through your own fear of confrontation, abandonment, loneliness, or uncertainty. That doesn't mean you're responsible for someone else's manipulation. It means you have influence over what happens next. You might have learned to over-explain because you feared being misunderstood. You might have learned to apologize quickly because conflict frightened you. You might have learned to accept crumbs because asking for more seemed dangerous. Those patterns were adaptations. And adaptations can be unlearned. You can practice saying less. You can practice waiting before responding. You can practice tolerating someone else's disappointment without immediately rushing to fix it. You can practice allowing silence to exist without filling it with explanations. You can practice saying no without attaching a 10-minute speech to the word. At first, this can feel strangely uncomfortable. That's normal. When you've spent years believing that someone else's emotional reaction determines whether you're safe, setting a boundary can feel almost like breaking a law. Your mind may immediately whisper, "They're going to be angry. Maybe they will." But their anger doesn't necessarily mean your boundary is wrong. Sometimes the strongest evidence that a boundary was necessary is the intensity of the reaction it produces. Healthy people may not love every boundary, but they can discuss it. Controlling people often experience boundaries as obstacles to overcome. And that distinction matters. You don't need to win an argument with someone who wants control. You need to stop handing them the courtroom. You don't need to prove that you're a good person. You need to live according to your values. You don't need to convince them that you deserve respect. You need to stop remaining in situations where disrespect has become the price of admission. This doesn't mean becoming heartless. In fact, healthy boundaries often make genuine compassion possible because you're no longer giving from fear. You can care about someone without rescuing them. You can understand someone's childhood without excusing their behavior. You can recognize someone's wounds without volunteering to be wounded by them. You can forgive someone without giving them access to you again. And you can love someone while deciding that the relationship is no longer healthy enough to continue. That is not cruelty. That is discernment. Eventually, something begins to change inside you. You stop seeing yourself as someone trapped in another person's personality. You start seeing yourself as someone capable of making decisions. And that's the real escape. Not getting the perfect apology. Not watching the other person regret losing you. Not waiting for them to finally understand what they did. Not becoming so successful that they feel jealous. Your freedom doesn't have to depend on their reaction. It begins when your life stops revolving around their reaction. They may continue trying to provoke you. They may attempt guilt, charm, anger, silence, promises, or emotional pressure. But those tactics become less effective when they no longer determine your behavior. The goal isn't to become impossible to hurt. The goal is to become difficult to control. There is a difference. You may still feel sadness. You may still miss them. You may still wonder whether things could have been different. You may still have moments when you question yourself. Healing doesn't require emotional perfection. It requires returning to yourself each time you lose your center. And eventually, you realize that the person you were desperately trying to protect was you. The version of you who stayed quiet. The version who kept explaining. The version who accepted less. The version who confused endurance with loyalty. The version who believed that leaving meant failure. That person doesn't need your shame. They need your compassion. Because they were trying to survive with the tools they had. Now you can give yourself better tools. Boundaries, clarity, distance, support, self-trust, and the willingness to walk away when someone's behavior repeatedly tells you that staying is costing too much. Their control was never your destiny. It was a pattern, and patterns can be broken. The moment you stop asking how to become acceptable enough for someone else's behavior to change, you begin asking a far more important question. What kind of life becomes possible when I no longer organize myself around someone else's control? That question opens a door, and you are allowed to walk through it. There are real practical ways to reach a place where the narcissist ends up regretting the way they treated you. And honestly, it's not as complicated as it might seem right now. What it does require is intention, a plan, a clear sense of what you're doing and why. So let's walk through this together. 10 genuinely powerful ways to help a narcissist come face to face with the consequences of their own behavior. The first thing to understand, and maybe the most important thing on this entire list, is that nothing rattles a narcissist quite like watching you thrive without them. So start there. Start by building a genuinely happy life that has nothing to do with their presence or approval. Fill your world with people who actually care about you, who see you as a whole person rather than a supporting character in someone else's drama. Because that's really what it comes down to. You are not a side character in their story. You are the main character in your own. Let go of any lingering guilt you might still be carrying, guilt that was probably never yours to carry in the first place, and start doing the things that genuinely make you feel alive. Take that trip with your friends you've been putting off. Spend time outdoors, away from screens and noise, somewhere the air feels different. Watch films that actually engage your mind instead of numbing it. And above all, remind yourself as often as you need to that you deserve so much more than what they were ever capable of offering you. Real happiness, real satisfaction, real freedom. Take a breath, hold on to everything you've learned from this experience, and let it fuel the life you're building now. A life that exists entirely outside their shadow. The second approach is about becoming a genuinely better version of yourself than they ever managed to be. Narcissists are remarkably talented at performing kindness and warmth when it serves them, all while operating underneath with manipulation, self-interest, and a willingness to hurt anyone who gets in their way. They'll do whatever it takes to get what they want, regardless of the collateral damage. So if you want them to feel the weight of what they did, the most powerful response is simply to be better than they are, in every meaningful sense. Tap into whatever inner strength you have and rise above the behavior they modeled for you. Choose kindness. Choose understanding. Choose to genuinely care about the people around you. Every time you embody these qualities consistently, you strip away the very power they were counting on, and you quietly reveal just how small and insignificant their behavior really was. Nobody expects you to be flawless. That's not the goal here. Instead, focus on how the whole experience, painful as it was, has actually sharpened you, made you wiser, made you more capable of navigating the world with clarity. Third on this list, and honestly one of the most transformative things you can do, is to never be afraid to advocate for yourself. Standing your ground is one of the single most effective ways to make someone who's wronged you sit with the reality of what they did. Narcissists thrive on control. Control over situations, control over people, control over the narrative. So the moment you push back against that control, even in small ways, it forces them to confront their own behavior in a way they've spent a lifetime avoiding. Just stay alert though, because narcissists are skilled at flipping the script, at convincing you that somehow you're the one causing problems while they're just an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. Don't fall for it. Don't let yourself get pulled into that particular web. If someone keeps belittling you, mocking you, or chipping away at your confidence again and again, that's your signal that something needs to change. You are never obligated to tolerate mistreatment simply because the other person can't seem to find anyone else willing to put up with it. If a person can't offer you basic respect and kindness, they haven't earned your presence, and they certainly haven't earned your loyalty. The fourth strategy centers on projecting genuine confidence and independence. If you want a narcissist to truly reckon with what they've done, you have to anchor yourself in real belief in your own worth and your own abilities. When you carry that kind of quiet self-assurance, it becomes remarkably difficult for anyone to knock you down or make you doubt your value. And to be clear, this isn't about arrogance or putting on a show. It's about building something solid enough that other people's attempts to tear you down simply don't land the way they're hoping. Their efforts will crumble before they ever reach the core of who you are, and that failure, that inability to shake you, will eventually sit with them as its own kind of reckoning. It's also worth actively cultivating self-sufficiency, learning to find your sense of validation and happiness from within rather than constantly seeking it from other people. Narcissists often rely on convincing you that you can't function without them, using every manipulative trick available to reinforce that dependency. But the truth is the opposite. You are a complete, self-contained person, fully capable of building a fulfilling life with or without them in it. Fifth, and this one deserves real emphasis, is prioritizing your own care and well-being. If you've spent time navigating someone else's dishonesty, betrayal, or manipulation, it's completely natural to be left feeling wounded and angry. That's a normal human response to real harm. But it's crucial not to let those emotions take over and dictate the direction of your life going forward. Taking care of yourself becomes one of the most powerful tools you have, not just for your own healing, but as a way of quietly demonstrating that their actions didn't succeed in breaking you. I won't pretend it's easy to maintain a positive outlook after being hurt like that, but it is absolutely possible. And it starts with the fundamentals: nourishing your body with food that actually supports you, moving regularly in ways that feel good, and making sure you're getting the rest your mind and body genuinely need. Give yourself permission to indulge in things that help you unwind, whether that's a massage, a long walk somewhere green and quiet, or simply unstructured time with people who make you feel safe. Surround yourself with the people who show up for you consistently, who genuinely have your back. Every time you choose to prioritize your own well-being, you make it that much harder for a narcissist to maintain any hold over you, and you take one more step toward reclaiming the power that was always rightfully yours. The sixth point is simple but transformative. Stop apologizing to them. Ever. Narcissists have often perfected the art of making you feel responsible for things that were never your fault, twisting conversations and distorting reality until you start questioning your own perception of events. If you've ever tried to apologize to a narcissist, you already know how effortlessly they can bend your words back on you, using them to chip away at your sense of self-worth. But here's the truth worth holding on to. You are not the one who caused harm in this dynamic. They are, and they are the ones who need to be held accountable for what they've done, not you. So resist the urge to explain yourself or apologize when they try to make you feel inadequate or wrong. Every time you say sorry for something you didn't actually do or stay silent instead of standing up for yourself in the face of mistreatment, you hand them a little more control over your life, control they absolutely do not deserve to hold. Seventh, get comfortable with silence and get comfortable treating their presence as irrelevant to your life. One of the most effective ways to make a narcissist confront the reality of what they've done is to simply stop engaging altogether, to give them nothing, no reaction, no attention, no acknowledgement. If being around them feels unbearable, then create distance, real distance, and redirect that energy toward your own needs and towards strengthening the relationships that actually nourish you. Make a conscious effort to spend your time with people who genuinely uplift you and support your growth, and step back from anyone who consistently drains you or diminishes you. The moment a narcissist realizes that their behavior no longer registers with you, that you've genuinely stopped caring about their opinion or their approval, something shifts in them. They start to sit with the reality of what they've lost and the isolation their own actions created. That kind of internal reckoning can be genuinely destabilizing for them. And it may even lead them to seek your forgiveness sooner than you'd expect, though by then, that's entirely on your own terms whether you choose to offer it. Which brings us to something equally important: protecting your mental strength and staying focused no matter how the situation makes you feel in the moment. If your goal is for a narcissist to genuinely sit with regret, you have to hold on to your composure, even when their behavior stirs up real anger or sadness in you. Showing weakness or instability in front of a narcissist tends to invite more mistreatment, not less, because it signals to them that their tactics are working. Instead, channel that energy into things that actually bring you joy and support your personal growth. Remember that what narcissists crave most is power and control. So the simplest way to disrupt that entirely is to refuse to give it to them. Turn your focus away from their negativity and pour your energy into building a life that genuinely reflects who you are and what you value. Ninth on this list, Stop offering them praise or validation, because withholding that actually does more to expose their flaws than almost anything else you could say directly. Flattery feeds a narcissist's ego and reinforces the very behaviors you're trying to move away from, so consciously choosing not to hand them compliments or validation removes one of their primary sources of fuel. Rather than reinforcing their self-image, let their own mistakes and shortcomings speak for themselves without your input propping them up. This kind of quiet, honest withdrawal can genuinely unsettle them, making it increasingly difficult for them to feel comfortable in your presence. And if they keep trying to manipulate the situation back in their favor, hold your ground firmly. Reclaim your own sense of self by refusing to let their perception define how you see yourself. And finally, the 10th strategy: don't give in to their demands and don't let their expectations dictate your choices. Narcissists tend to be masters of manipulation and control, and they'll often apply relentless, exhausting pressure trying to mold you into whatever shape best serves their needs. If you ever find yourself feeling cornered by a narcissist who simply won't back down, stand firm exactly where you are. Don't let anyone pressure you into decisions that don't align with what you actually want. Hold on to your convictions and don't allow them to steer your choices for you. If someone keeps pushing you for something you're simply not willing to give, you can handle it with grace by calmly and clearly letting them know you're not interested, then staying firm in that decision without getting drawn into their pleading or persistence. Setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish. In a strange way, it actually benefits both people involved, even if the narcissist doesn't see it that way in the moment. Speak those boundaries clearly and don't be afraid to explain how important they are to your own growth and well-being. And if the other person refuses to respect the limits you've set, it's completely acceptable to simply end the interaction and walk away. You don't owe anyone a lengthy justification for protecting your own peace. By staying resolute and refusing to bend to their demands or expectations, you send an unmistakable message, one that eventually forces them to reckon with just how damaging their behavior truly was. At the end of the day, remember this: nobody deserves to be mistreated or abused. And if you've found yourself in that kind of situation, it's essential to hold on to hope and keep searching for something better. By putting these strategies into practice, you're not just theoretically standing up to a narcissist, you're actively reclaiming your life, prioritizing your own well-being above everything else, and making it far harder for them to ever pull you back into that cycle of harm again.